Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. We are very lucky to be joined here today by Mr. Tom Sheppard. Tom, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me, sir. Much appreciated.
I want to open with reading you a quote, one that I enjoy and one that I think that you'll enjoy. Maybe you've heard it, maybe not, and just get your thoughts on it. And I think this will help explain for anyone who might, by chance, not know who you are and what it is that you do, that it'll help us get there. So it's a quote by Plato. It says, "He who is only an athlete is too crude, too vulgar, too much a savage. He who is a scholar only is too soft, too effeminate. The ideal citizen is the scholar athlete, the man of thought, and the man of action." What do you think
Wow,
about that?
talk about jumping in at the deep end. I like that. I mean that. Yes, I have heard that before. It's a fantastic one. I like that. It's for me. That's a great way of kind of summing up the whole like warrior monk type of mentality that you'll see in like Buddhism and things like that. The first thing that springs to mind when I hear you say that, for me is that we kind of live in a time where we focus very much on, say, now mental health is more at the forefront of people's thinking, which I think is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. But I think we're still in a scenario where we're very bifocal, where we look at mental health and physical health almost as two separate entities. And I think the more that we try to separate those two things, the less successful we're going to be at optimizing either of them. And, I'm not saying someone has to train at an elite level to be happy. And I'm not saying, vice versa. But what I am saying is that people probably cannot feel their best mentally or perform at their best physically if the other one is suboptimal, you know? And I think the more we kind of get to grips with the fact that as as a whole, the payoff of trying to optimizing the two is one of those scenarios where it's like 1 + 1 is 3, and they have these all these positive feedback loops into each other. The more we come to kind of grasp with that and realize that it is almost all the same thing in reality, I think the closer we're all going to come to being much better off, right now. So that's the thing that kind of jumps out to me right there is to me it's very true is that just if we make it like a pure meathead example, for maybe the lifters who don't want to like talk about this too in depth in like philosophy or whatever, but if you are just going in the gym and you're just moving maximal load, you don't care how you're moving it. It's just move it from A to B. We all know where that leads for most people at some point. Same with your programming. If your programming is just kind of off the cuff and it's just go in and trash yourself, we all know where that leads. At some point, there's got to be some input in terms of concentration, intelligence, planning, whatever you want to call it, where now it's how are you doing the lifts that you want to do? How are you planning your programming in the long term for progression? How well are you concentrating even in the gym and things like that? So there's a mental aspect even to that, what we would perceive as almost purely physical output there. So we can't really separate the two in any way. And I think a big part of the problem we have right now is we're looking at all of these things, and quite often the answer to your question or your problem usually lies in the opposite. So what I mean by that is if you're struggling with your mental health, say your mood is not great, you're depressed, whatever terminology you want to use, whatever place you're in, often the place that how you're going to get to that is by going through the body. Be active, get outside more, do something, stimulate yourself. And then similarly, for a lot of people who are, should we say, maybe struggling physically, whether their performance isn't improving, they're finding it hard to go to the gym, whatever, then they probably need to focus on the mental aspect. Maybe you're going to the gym and not seeing results because when you're in the gym, you're not present. You're not concentrating, you're not focusing on what you're doing. Or maybe, you don't have the willpower right now to train hard enough to get the results that you're after. And willpower is a trainable skill at the end of the day. We just have to consciously choose to train it. So quite often the answer lies in the opposite place. And that's why I'm kind of saying they're all intertwined. So apologies, that was a little bit of a tangent, but that's what jumps to mind when you say that for me is just that the sooner we start training both, like if you trained your mind, like most of us can all get our head around going in the gym 3 hours a week total, or 3 times an hour, whatever. and doing something that will bring us results long term, etc. But how many of us get our head around doing something 10 minutes a day that cognitively brings us benefits in the long term? That we need to apply the same mentality to both. And that's, for me, in my opinion, where the real results, outside of perhaps just pure aesthetics, really start to come from training.
What a great answer, and please don't apologize for the tangents. That's what that, in my opinion, that's what podcasts exist for, so that we can go down these tangents. To kind of sum it up, and to just play off what you're saying there, um, maybe more relevant in the current social media landscape of this like optimal training versus bro science kind of debate, if you will. I
Sure.
struggle to even call it a debate, because why, like, they're not opposite, but it's like the answer isn't train smart or train hard. It's like train smart and train hard. And part of training smart is also knowing when to rest, also knowing how to fuel yourself properly, also knowing
Mm-hmm.
how to recover properly in all of these things. And so it's like, for me, it's, yeah, we gotta, you can't think that it's any one thing. If it was always, if the answer was so simple as like, hey, just do this,
Yeah.
well, then everybody would just do this or do whatever that thing is. This would be a solved issue, and we wouldn't have to be having these discussions, and everybody would be just walking around and be, 6'2", 225, and 7% body fat. But
Yeah.
such is not the world,
Oh
unfortunately.
man, that'd be great. Feel like being in Dragon Ball Z.
It would be. Now, something that I just mentioned to you before we started recording, you're taking a trip in September, I believe it is, to
Mm-hmm.
the Shaolin Temple Europe. Can you tell me,
Yes.
just describe it briefly for anyone who might not know what that is, and tell me about why is that an interest of yours? Because it's something that I found trickled on the
Mm-hmm.
internet a few years ago, and super cool. So it's super cool to talk to someone who's actually going to go there.
Sure. So, I mean, the idea behind Shaolin Buddhism is just it's essentially the kind of Zen Buddhism, etc. Is basically the combination of kung fu and martial arts with Buddhist teachings in essence. And again, very much around the idea um, that meditation and physical practice, enlightenment, etc., they're all intertwined. Like you can't, they would say that you can't reach, cognitive mental enlightenment without the physical side and so on and so forth. You also can't reach the highest levels of physical performance without training the mind, meditating, and so on and so forth. And, that's something I've been interested in probably for a long time, since probably 17 or 18 years old, when I was probably going through what were my worst periods in terms of mental health. And it was the more Eastern way of looking at things in terms of philosophy or life, etc., have always appealed to me more. To be brutally honest with you, um, I would say the reason I didn't kind of pursue it earlier in my life is I just didn't have the confidence to do it. I think, especially when I was going through a really rough time, I always held out these kind of Buddhist ideas and Buddhist teachings as like, that would be the thing that saves me. And that actually made me not go after them, because if you have this Hail Mary pass or this ace card, and then you play it and it doesn't work, you have
Mm.
nothing. Whereas if you keep it in your pocket, there's always that, if things get really bad, I could do this. And that almost is more reassuring than doing the thing anyway. So I think for a long time, I held that back on purpose because it was like my reserve in case I needed it. But I started to realize that as I got through a better place in my life, that it was very unlikely I was ever going to get to that place again or somewhere worse, which I then kind of felt like, why am I holding back this part of who I feel I should, who I feel I want to be, for what am I waiting around for at this point? So that's why I decided to pursue it more intently. Until then, I was still reading like Buddhist scriptures and teachings and things like that, but I always felt a bit detached from it. So now I very much jumped in more full force. The headmaster at the Shaolin Temple Europe, Shi Heng Yi, really was the one that made me take that step, purely because he has kind of grown up in a similar world to us. Um, and I just like the way he spoke about things. It just made it a bit more real. He felt a lot more grounded in the real world, like to the point where all of us can probably kind of relate a little bit better. Um, Something about the way that he spoke resonated. Like different coaches, different teachers are always going to resonate with different people.
Mhm.
He was the one for me that made me think like I can get my head around this. Like I can dive deep on this and actually maybe achieve the things that I want from it. And he is the headmaster at the Shaolin Temple Europe, and I started going into more of his stuff, and I have been for several years now. And again, I had taken that extra step, but again, I was like, I really want to go, I really want to go. And Naomi, my wife, was kept saying like, why are you not? Like, what's stopping you? I was like, well, what is stopping me? This again, it was almost like my reserve card, that I wanted to hold. So I just took, I said, you know what, you're right. And one day, just like without even thinking, I just went on and booked it. And I was like, I don't know which one I don't even know the difference between all these different retreats. It doesn't matter. I just have to book something. It doesn't, I just need to get there. So that's what I did. My training and stuff the last couple of months has changed quite a bit. And the thing of that, though, is it's forced my hand to jump more in the deep end with the physical practices of it. Um, I have no experience in martial arts, for the record. I did MMA for a couple of years at university. I regret giving it up, but beyond that, I have nothing. My goal is more of the mentality, cognitive, philosophical side of it or whatever. But my ultimate goal would be I want to try and take what Shaolin does with Kung Fu, which is take a martial art, take a physical practice, and turn it into an all encompassing, life enhancing protocol, in terms of mental, spiritual, and physical well being. I want to be able to do that with weightlifting. Like, how can we create a template or a way of looking at weightlifting that can do for individuals what Kung Fu, martial arts, and Shaolin does for individuals who are into that? Because for those individuals that go into things like Kung Fu and really immerse themselves in it, it is a truly life changing thing. And I want a way that for those who want it to be able to glean that from going to the gym. I don't care whether they lift a barbell or a kettlebell. I don't care whether they go running. It is actually irrelevant. But I want to go there and immerse in it so I can come back hopefully with a way of thinking, right, how do I create the Shaolin temple for weightlifting? Is the ultimate end goal. And maybe that's a crazy goal to have, but I feel like it's something the world needs and that I wish was there for me. I was very lucky to add my older brother to get me into lifting when I was in a really bad place. And for many years, lifting was the only thing that, kept me going, just by the skin of my teeth, as it were. Um, and there are so many other people I know out there that are in that same scenario where like lifting is the thing that's dragging them through the day in a good way. And I just wonder, can we use it? Is there a better way of using lifting as a gateway into this bigger world of, enhancement, self improvement, self realization, whatever, so that they can make bigger wholesale changes rather than just get jacked? Because,
I
sorry, go on.
no, finish that.
I was going to say that a lot of people will come to coaches with goals like, from I train with a lot of strength athletes. It's not the only people I coach, but there's a lot of them. There's always something like a number or a lift or whatever. And then you coach someone long enough and you realize it's really not about the number at all. And eventually, if you dig down deep enough, or you make them dig down deep enough, they realize that too. And it's like, for example, I have 3 people right now who are chasing a 1,000 pound squat, which is a fantastic goal, absolutely fantastic. And as and when they get it, I will be the first to stand up and applaud and say it's fantastic. But what is it that does for them as a person that makes it important? Because like it's as soon as you squat that, you just want 1,010 anyway. We all know that. So what does hitting that milestone represent to them? So some of them it was going to be like, I was the weak kid at school. I always felt like I was
Mm-hmm.
bullied, or maybe I never felt like I was a strong person in general. And now this to me is like the answer or the point in my life where it's like you have arrived. You are now a strong person, and that's your barometer for success in that. Cool, good for you. Let's just remember that. That's why we're doing it. That number could be 500, it could be 600, it could be 100, I don't care, but that's what it represents. Cool, that's what we need to keep in mind when we're going for it. And I just think all of us probably, if we are really introspective, all of our goals probably have a deeper layer like that. And you're like, why are you why what does running the marathon mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
You know what it, and for most it could be as simple as it's something I don't think I can do. Cool. And let's be honest, for most, that's where training is the biggest probable benefit is right there is taking something that you physically cannot do right now and proving to yourself in 6 months, 3 months, whatever, that you have the wherewithal and the means to make it something that you can do. Because that applies to everything in life. You don't think you can be a good dad. Well, look, you didn't think you could do that. You didn't think you could run a marathon. Now you can't. That seemed insurmountable. So maybe you can be a better father or a better husband, whatever it might be. Maybe you can get that promotion. It's just all about you realizing perhaps that you have a bit more in control than you think. And again, I'm probably going way too far off the reserve there, so apologies.
No. This is perfect. This is honestly, I mean, this is the first time you and I have spoken, and
Mhm.
this type of conversation, like this is exactly why I started this podcast, because
Mhm.
I started to realize these things in my own life through my own journey that like, hey, this fitness and gym stuff, like, and by all means, like I have like very little, basically zero accolades compared to you and compared to, the people that you train. Like 1,000 pound squat is inconceivable to me. Like I'm never going to squat 1,000 pounds. Um, but I realized how important it was to the rest of my life and all of these things that you're mentioning, and trying to use the example of like using fitness as a way of life.
Yeah.
And maybe you're not gonna, you're not gonna live at a temple. You're not gonna go live at a monastery and be on a mountain and just be like lifting, just like squat, bench, deadlift by yourself, living in a hut
Mhm.
on the top of a mountain. Like that's probably not a way to live your life. But how can we start to emulate some of that? And so while you say it's a lofty goal, I mean, I think I agree with you on that it's a lofty goal in terms of like there's not going to be a temple of fitness. I mean, like
Mhm.
elitefts, yes, might be like the
Yeah.
the temple of fitness in these kind of facilities. Um, but to on the other side of it, like I think people like you, dare I say, people like myself and everyone in fitness, like we are doing this in giving people the roadmap and saying like, hey, I've done this and it's worked for me, and look at the things that it's done for me.
Mhm.
It's just going to be the entry point is different
Yeah.
because of the way that the world works. The selling point is not, hey, this is going to like improve everything in your life and do all this stuff. It's, you're going to lose 10 pounds. You're going to, increase your muscle mass a little bit. You're going to look a little bit better. You get a six pack for the beach. And that's kind of, unfortunately, more of like the entry point. But really what keeps everyone in the game longest is like, I came in here to get shredded, and I came out of here being, just a better human being. And
Sure.
that's the best part of fitness.
Sure. And those, we can call them superficial goals. I don't necessarily agree with the terminology, but when I say that, everyone's going to kind of know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that. Like let's say, someone wants to be a quantum physicist when they grow up. You're not going to say, cool, here is a PhD thesis on quantum physics. You're going to teach them basic math or whatever,
Right.
whatever is first, right? Whatever is approachable to that person at that moment in time, that's what you start with. And, for some individuals, that might be getting leaner for a wedding, or it might be getting stronger, or it doesn't matter. If it gets them in there, it's a win. And this is the bit that always gets me. It's like people are almost embarrassed about what gets them in the gym. It's like, dude, you're in the gym. Like, you're not at home watching 4 hours of Netflix, eating your third tub of Ben and Jerry's. You're in the gym. It is completely irrelevant why you're there. If you only want bigger biceps, that's okay. You're in the environment to discover probably what you actually want later
Mm-hmm.
on, but you're in here, and that's the hardest step, as many of us have discovered. And then over time, you get more invested into the process. You learn more about it, because at first in the gym, imagine, go back to day one in the gym, or maybe there are some people listening who are on day zero, haven't been in yet. All of your thought processes are like, I don't know how to set up this machine. I don't know how to do this movement. Everyone's watching me. I don't like, there's all this noise. And then it's only once you've been in the gym long enough and you've kind of found your thing, you become confident enough that all of that noise can settle and go away. It's just like the first time someone meditates, their mind is a trillion miles an hour and they're like, I don't understand what this is about. And then they practice and they practice and the mind gets quieter and quieter. And then there's a moment like, oh, well, the gym is the exact same thing. Gym is just meditation where you move.
Yes.
It's meditation is the practice of putting the mind onto a sole focus, whether it's a candle, whether it's the breath, whether it's your body, whether it's the squat that you're performing. The goal is just turn your mind into a tunnel vision type machine where it's that singular focus. And then once you hit that point where you're like, I've been doing whatever, front crawl, front squat, doesn't matter, this thing long enough that now all that noise is gone and I have that tunnel vision focus, that's where the real fun in terms of like what you can get from it mentally, in my opinion, at least, starts to come in. And that's where, to me, again, the carryover really starts to come, because now you're in a position where you can focus and concentrate on what you're doing properly, which is, let's be honest, every single one of us needs to be able to concentrate better. We're in a society right now where our concentration is being pulled in a million different directions at all times. If I said this on a podcast the other day, if I could take like a youth athlete and it was like, what superpower would you give them to make them a great athlete? I was like, I'd give them the ability to focus endlessly.
Hmm.
Everything else will pale, and like, we've all seen great talent go to waste because it's not applied, right? Just unbreakable focus would be what I'd give them. We can train that. And then also then we start to really kind of clue into like the sensations that the body goes through when we're lifting or running, or whatever it might be. We become, without sounding too wishy-washy, like at one with mind and body at the same time. And that will sound really strange to some people, but you talk to someone who's been running for a long time, there are going to be periods when they are in their stride. Their body just feels like it's moving almost on its own. There's like this fluidity, same as someone's been swimming for a long time. Or you ask an Olympic weightlifter what it feels like when you hit those very, very rare but perfect lifts and everything moves in harmony. Like, that's that's basically Zen. Basically, that's what
Mm-hmm.
we're all kind of looking for. Gives you just a brief glimpse of that. And then obviously on top of that, we have the progression that comes into it. Like, I couldn't do this 3 months ago and now I can. There's that constant kind of feedback of like, you can do stuff that you can't do right now. It's possible. You just have to put in the hard work. And then for me, another big lesson that comes out of it is the accountability side. Just, you know, we haven't gotten to the point yet with AI or coaching or technology, whatever, where someone can do your workout for you. Right? You still have to do it. And if you don't put, even if you're in the gym, if you don't put in the correct effort, you don't get the results. Like, there is no way of lying here. There is no cheat code. It's that simple. It's all on you. And, as is your personal progression in any other aspect of life. Like, no one's going to make you a better employee. No one's going to make you a better father, wife, whatever it might be. It's all on you, and there's no way of faking it. And I think it teaches us that, and it reminds us that most of the important things in life come with delayed gratification. Like, being really jacked is not like Amazon Prime. You can't just get it tomorrow because you really want it, right? And that's the same with all the meaning. Like, think of all the things in your life that bring you a lot of contentment or fulfillment. I bet none of them were achieved quickly. There was
Of course.
the whole reason they give you fulfillment and contentment is because there was all this suffering that came before it. And that is the reality of everything else that's important to most people as well. And I just think the gym, within its own little microcosm, in its own little bubble, sums up all of those really cool life lessons that maybe are so easy to forget now because the rest of society is so quick and fast and busy, that it just brings your focus back into the slow burners, the hard stuff. That's where the happiness, if that's, I mean, well, that's what we're all really after here, right? That's where that lays. So if it's hard, if it's happening a lot slower than you want, and if you feel like giving up, you're probably going in the right direction. And I'm sorry about that, but I'm also not sorry.
No, I always say that the gym is one of the few, maybe one of the last, but for sure one of the few almost entirely merit-based places that we have left,
Mhm.
in that your effort leads directly to your outcomes. You
Yeah.
can, work your butt off at your job, and if your boss doesn't like your haircut, you're not going to get a promotion. Silly example, but just to,
No, I
paint the
get it.
picture. In the gym, if you couldn't lift the weight, it's not because the weights didn't like you that day, or the weather was bad, or there's no reason other than well, your training didn't support lifting that weight on that day, or your recovery, or your something that you didn't allow you to perform on that day.
Mm.
Now we can think about that in the negative, but I also prefer to think about it in the positive, in that, well, that means that if it's all my fault, if it's all on me, then that means that I also have the power to improve this. I can change my training, I can change my diet, I can change my whatever in order to achieve that goal or do that thing. And there's something about having that control, because there's not many things in our life that we do have full control over, right? And we try and talk about this internal locus of control and not worry about the news and politics and the things that you can't control. But it's hard because they do impact you and you can't do anything about them. The gym, you can actually just impact that. 99% is like entirely up to you. There's not just bad luck that happens. No one's out to get you there. And so I think that when we find that control in the gym, that's when people start to hit their sweet spot. People start to realize, oh, I did X and I got Y. Well, that's great. I can do, the next thing to get the next one. I put up a post this morning that was like this exact thing. And, it's a little bit cheeky, but it's like, people who don't find fun in the gym haven't bench pressed 225 for the first time. And it's not about benching 225, but it's about, oh, I did the thing and then I got there. And once you realize that and you look back, down the road at your logbook, and you're like, oh, these are the things I did to get here. And now I can do it. Now is when the real fun starts. So like, I'm totally just like in agreement with everything that you're saying here about we can control this, and having that control is a huge part of why the gym is so important. But it also puts some onus on us to like, hey, if there are things that aren't working in the gym, like this is on you to fix it. And like, you can fix this. Right. And so whether it's training, whether it's your sleep, whether it's your nutrition, like it's something that you can implement here or affect here.
Yeah, I mean, I love that, and I like the way you worded that. Thank you. I mean, there's, we had my wife and I had a friend recently say went through a very bad patch mentally, and at one point I said the phrase to him, "No one is coming to save you," and it sounds really negative, but the follow up is because you have all the tools.
Mm-hmm.
And that, maybe this is a bit dramatic to say, but like that applies to everyone in all aspects of life. Like, you have the tools to get to the things that you want, and the sooner you accept that, the sooner you start getting towards the things that you truly want. Like, we could all sit down and make up 1,000 excuses if we want. Of course we can. The only thing those excuses are hurting is you at the end of the day. So you can choose to lean on them if you wish, or you can choose not to. There's always a way, if I believe, if you really, really want to. And you said inner locus of control. I love that, because like a lot of people kind of feel like they live in chaos, and I get it. We in reality we live like kings right now, but we've never been like more rushed off our feet and like feeling lost than ever. But you take something like the gym, and for other people, it won't be lifting weights. It might be like they take up painting. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was a nerd, right? I used to do Warhammer models, the tiny little like fantasy models that you put. Like, some people would be something like that, where it's like no matter what the outside world is doing, I go in and I do this, and the whole world melts away. Like, for many of us, then that's going to be lifting. And when your whole life is chaos, if you can control this tiny little corner down here, this is the gym time. That, even if it's 40 minutes a day or whatever, I don't care. When you can control that, you have somewhere to start. Because when you have utter chaos, where do you start? Like, what's the thing you do first? Whereas you got that gym window there, you're like, I can control this. And then maybe that comes then after that. It's like, well, I control this time in my day. This is where I apply myself for the things that are for me and me alone. Maybe then that becomes, well, after the gym, I go sit in my car and I have 5 or 10 minutes just on my own breathing. Or maybe it's I go home and I have an hour with my kids because I feel like I've de stressed and I'm in a better mental place. I can go and enjoy being present with my family or whatever it is. But basically, from that little window, we just start organizing the chaos, and it just branches out little by little until eventually, hopefully, we control a much bigger portion of that. And again, like you said, I think that is a huge benefit of it. And then we start to realize that the self accountability that maybe subconsciously many of us are scared of is actually the most empowering thing that we have. The fact that you are in control and it is on you is your superpower. It is your ability to change how you experience your own life. Like, if we didn't have that, we would just be puppets on strings. We wouldn't have any say. That sounds awful to me. um, and again, so this ends up going so far beyond like putting 10 kilos on your bench press, and yet it kind of doesn't, because that 10 kilos represents all those things at the same time. And like you said earlier, like you don't have the credentials of some of the people that I coach, for example. And I know what you mean by that. I know you mean it in this way, but this kind of comment gets made a lot by people, and it's like there is no better or worse here in this
Mhm.
universe. Like there is different. And let's stop looking at things like weights, because this is an easy example for it. Like the 1,000 pound squat is, of course, it's tremendous, but the thing that actually makes it matter is the effort that is applied to achieve it. That's the only thing that gives it meaning. And for some people, they will, say it takes 15 years for that lifter to get that 1,000 pound squat. Some lifters will apply that exact same effort to get a 400 pound squat. That it is just as meaningful. It is no worse, no better. It's just that is that person's ceiling, and in that time frame, how they work to get there is the important thing. And I think sometimes we down talk our own achievements. We almost scupper ourselves along this path because we're comparing ourselves to everyone else. And the the reality of it is that no one else has experienced your life in the exact manner that you have. So no one else can really have the exact same outcomes or inputs, right? So no one's upper limits or whatever is going to be the exact same as the next person. So we really can't compare at all. Like I've got people who like get into lifting at whatever age, like they may be the most gifted athlete in the world, but if they start lifting at 50, their upper ceiling is totally different to what it was when they were 20. So even within that individual person, their entry point will govern whatever their upper ceiling is. So it's all so contextual, but really the only context that matters is there's you yesterday and there's you today. Is this one better right now in any micro way of measuring? Yes, then that's all that matters. And the sooner we get our head around the fact that your goals matter, regardless of the magnitude or the perceived importance of them, they are important because they're yours. And that is the only thing that matters. You should never be embarrassed about that. You should never feel like you are belittled compared to someone else who's maybe striving for more or achieving more right now, because we are all on very individual paths. And again, the only thing we can all share is effort applied over time. That's the only language all of us can talk and understand and have the same grounding in. So why don't we just value that instead? Like, okay, this lift took me 10 years to get. That's the important part. I don't care. It sounds really stupid to say, right? Because I'm a strength coach. I don't like the term, but I don't know what else to call it. Like, but the weight on the bar doesn't matter. I don't care. I really don't. I just matter what it does for that person and what they had to do to get it, and the rest is irrelevant. Which again, I know sounds a bit silly to say, but that is the truth.
Yeah, it only matters if you're competing and you're trying to win a competition. Outside of that,
Mm-hmm.
for the rest of people, it's like, doesn't really impact your life. It's the, very cliche, but it's the journey to get there. And even still, it's zooming out. So the person who is, going to squat 1,000 pounds, like there was a time where they squatted 500 pounds for the first time and 400 pounds for the first time and 300 and 200 and whatever. And so wherever you are in that journey, it's like, yeah, well, that person was also there at one time. So you don't necessarily have to get to a point of squatting 1,000 pounds. Like I said, like I'm nowhere near that, but nor do I have any aspirations to get to that. And so I won't. And I'm content with that, because it's not like I'm not willing to trade the things that I would need to do in order to get to that goal. Right. And I think that's another important aspect of this. When you see a bodybuilder on stage and, I want to do so and so's workout. It's like, well, do you want to do all the things that they do, or do you want to just pick the things that you think that they do, right? Which one is it? Which comes back to the whole point you were saying earlier about the progress that the biggest opportunity for progress is likely in the opposite of whatever we need to do. So if you need to train harder, or if you need to, whatever the thing that we all work towards our strengths. Sometimes we need to work on our weaknesses a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Which, to bring this conversation a little bit more technical, what are some ways that you try to help people to open up to the idea of like, hey, you're doing really good on this aspect of things. You're nailing your training, but your nutrition is lacking, or your sleep is lacking, your recovery is lacking, and we'll just use that as an example. how do you help people go from like, hey, instead of going harder at training, let's maybe take a day off training and focus like that time on some meal prep or focus some time on a sleep routine? How do you help people bridge that gap and realize that like they probably know that and they probably know they're not
Mm.
sleeping well, but they're not willing to do the things, they're not able to do the things? How do you help people bridge that gap?
There's there's got to be an initial conversation where you have to kind of meet them where they're at. And I know that's a really cliche thing to say, but like a lot of us are training addicts in disguise, and I will very happily hold my hand up and say that too, right? But there's a reason I use the term training addict, because it goes to the point where it becomes detrimental. But regardless of what the thing is that you're struggling with, you need to just reaffirm, you know, what the possible positive outcomes are of focusing on that thing. Because no one likes focusing on their weak points, right? It reminds you that you suck at something. Like, that's never cool. But it's where the biggest positive outcomes are always going to be had. So it's going through with individuals, like reaffirming that these things are the things that are holding you back. Like, if someone has already reached out for like a coach or any support in any kind of way, you can probably bet they've tried on their own for a while already. They didn't
Mhm.
just hit that barrier and on day one say, I need a coach or whatever. They've probably been banging their head against the wall for a while now. Depending on how stubborn they are, it might be a month, it might be 2 years. You don't know. But they've come to you because they probably tried their current approach a dozen times at least, and it hasn't paid dividends. So then you get to the point where it's like, well, right now, if you're running to stay still, what do you have to lose? And if you don't like what we do, the option is always open to go back to sleeping 4 hours a night if that's what you want. It's there at any time. And then what usually happens is, where the progress then really gets made, is addressing, well, what is the thing that's actually stopping you making these changes? Like the person with poor sleep, they're 4 or 5 hours a night, whatever it might be. What is it that's you're not? Chances are you're saying that you can't do it. It's not that you don't acknowledge that it's helpful. It's that you just kind of believe that you're not in a situation where you can do that. So then you have to start diving deeper into, well, what is it that, what do you perceive at least, are the obstacles that are stopping to get to this end goal? And let's say the end goal is 8 hours of sleep. Usually, if we can use it like a meathead example, it gets easier for people. If they're already in the gym, they already get this, right? It's like, if your lift right now is X and you want it to be Y, you wouldn't just go in the gym tomorrow and say, I'm going to load up an extra 50 pounds on the bar and let's see what happens. And if it doesn't work, I'll go in tomorrow, the day after, and put it on the bar again, and we'll do that, because eventually it'll work. No, you'd go, right, how many tiny little incremental processes are there between X and Y? Let's go with that. And you just have to apply the same. And again, this is yet another wonderful lesson from the gym. All big, wonderful improvements are made with like tiny, tiny little microscopic steps at a time, and it's for that person who is going to bed too late, not getting enough sleep. Maybe it's just slowly reducing their caffeine intake. Maybe it's slowly like bringing down how much TV they're watching in the evening. It doesn't matter what it is. The point is, there is going to be a way of dividing up the change that you need to make into digestible chunks, because nothing that happens fast really ever stays. Like, again, lifting example, you peak for a competition. Oh, I put 30 pounds or whatever on my squat. You didn't. You just got more recovered. And that 30 pounds is gone the week after the competition, right? If it comes fast, it goes fast. So I almost, when clients and stuff make progress really, really quick, I almost look at that with hesitancy, because I'm like, we disrupted the status quo here a little bit too much. Maybe that means there's a higher chance of that falling back or us losing that. The better option is almost always, let's just do this slow and gradual, because if you do it that way, then it stays. And we don't, because all of us probably can agree, we hate being in this process of peaks and troughs and setbacks and steps forward. Like, it just feels monotonous and it feels downheartening. It feels like demotivating. Whereas if we're just constantly inching forward in the tiniest way possible, that builds confidence, even if it's slow. And in the long term, it's not slower, right? Because you actually get to where you want to be. It's actually a lot quicker. The book Atomic Habits is a great one. that, and they summarize that up there, where it's like if you get 1% better at swimming every day, by the end of the year in 365 days, you're 37 times better, like 3,700% better. Like, where are your 1%s? That's it. That's all you got to, like, for some, that might be okay. Like, I need my protein intake's too low. I'm going to have a protein shake after I train. Even if that's only 3 days a week, there's your 1%. Do that. And then, when that's ingrained, when that's just like brushing your teeth, get the other 1%. What's the next one? What's the next lowest hanging fruit for us? And we just go through that process. Like, we don't need to make this intimidating for anyone. We don't need to make it scary. Sure, some people want like this big overhaul. Like, maybe they have these like epiphanies and this moment where they're like, something is really bad and I need to. Sure, maybe in those scenarios you can kind of change a bit more. But for 90+% of people, just do that, because then you're going to be there year after year getting those 1%, whatever they are representative of at that time. And then what happens is, in 5 years or 10 years, whatever it might be, all your friends or your family, all the people in the gym or whatever, they turn around to you and they start asking you what your secret is. And then you tell them the really disappointing answer of, I do these tiny little things slightly better day in, day out for a really long period of time. And then you want to know what the shortcut is that there isn't one. So, all of these battles all come down to just, what are you able to change right now? What is sustainable for you to change right now? Let's do that. Because, you know, anything any change is good. Any small incremental change is good and builds. What we want is momentum. Like, momentum breeds confidence. It builds resiliency, because then we have something to throw away if we stop doing it all. But more importantly, you get to see along the process then that these things actually do something. Like, it builds confidence in the process, not just yourself. Whereas, we go and do, let's say it's January 1st. We go from no training, no diet control whatsoever, and we go, right, let's go all in, like 5 days a week, like chicken and broccoli every day, whatever, right? When your investment is that high, where do your expectations go? They
Super
go,
high.
but the stuff you want never comes as that fast enough to meet those expectations, right? Whereas, when we put in 1%, we're okay with getting 1% back. And that can happen. That, the possible outcome actually matches the input of effort. Whereas in those scenarios, and that's why a lot of people won't last in that scenario. And, all the things that we think lead to quick fixes don't actually lead anywhere good, right? And by ingraining those 1%, go after those, we start to learn that the process is more important than the goal, as you've kind of already alluded to. And again, I'm dealing with people who are like business savvy, try to sum it up like this. We have a goal. Let's say it takes you a year to get to your weight loss goal or running your marathon or whatever. Say you cross the finish line of your marathon. How long are you happy for? It's not
30
long. Like, you
seconds.
might get a day,
Yeah.
and then crippling soreness will hit you, and you won't be happy. Or if it's a lift, a squat or whatever. Sometimes before you've even racked the bar, you're like, next. So how long did the happiness last? Like, for some, it might be a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Not so. If we were to look at this as a business transaction, you are going to make incredible amounts of effort for the next 365 days with zero payoff. If we ignore the process entirely, we're not invested in that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to cross that finish line here or squat that weight, whatever, and you're going to get a minute or a day. You're going to get a day of happiness. Does that sound like a good transaction to you? That sounds absolutely terrible. Whereas
Yeah.
if we say, right, let's start looking at the process more, let's start enjoying that a bit more. All of this process up to whatever that thing is up here, you get something out of all of this. All of that gives you something back, whether it's enjoyment, whether it's a life lesson, it doesn't really matter. It gives you something. Now the transaction's actually worth making. So I'm not here to say that like goals aren't important. What I'm saying is, if all you have is the goal, and there's no thought on the process, there's no enjoyment, there's no fulfillment, then you're going to find yourself really disappointed really regularly if you even get to your goal. But even
Mm-hmm.
here, like, and I'm going to say this because it's not cool, but guess what? Sometimes you don't get your goal. It does happen. And sometimes you even do everything right and still don't get your goal. It does happen. I'm sorry. But if all of this process stuff here is fulfilling and enjoying in some way. And that doesn't mean it's easy. It means this sucks, but I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Whether you're like halfway through your long endurance bike ride or halfway through your set of 10 on squats, like it sucks, but I'm happy I'm here. That's what we're looking for. If we get that all the way through the process, then by the time you get to the end goal, sure, it's great if you get it, but if you don't, it hasn't changed anything because you still got all out of it. So I get it's kind of like the superficial goals that we talked about. Goals are cool. They give you a direction to go in. They get you in the gym, they get you doing things initially, but if you want to last long enough to make the real meaningful changes, there has to be an enjoyment or an investment in the process. And that usually means that you have to some degree, enjoy whatever it is you've chosen to. Like, if you despise running, you do not have to run. If you hate lifting barbells, you do not have to lift a barbell. Like, no one is here to put a gun to your head. What matters is that there's enough fulfillment and enjoyment in the process that you can actually do it for long enough to get somewhere. That's the important. So, if someone is just getting into the gym, play around with stuff. Go do hot yoga, go do classes, go do kettlebells. I don't care, whatever. Find your thing and then go with that, because that's the only thing you'll last long enough at to get somewhere meaningful.
Totally agreed. I think that point you said just a minute ago is so important, just to highlight that the goal is not necessarily important in that you actually achieve it, but perhaps the most important part of the goal is that it gives you something to aim at. Because for the person who doesn't love exercise and isn't like a meathead, you're going to go in and you're going to try a bunch of stuff. And how many people have you known? I'm sure tons. I've known tons of people that they know that they should like go to the gym, or they know that they should exercise and it should be part of their life. I don't think this is rocket science for anyone. And they're just like, well, I just don't like it. And I try this, I try that. And I just go to the gym and I just do stuff because like I'm supposed to. And like, that's good. But how long does that last?
Mm-hmm.
Not very long most of the time. And it's because you're not aiming at anything. And so when your goal is like, gives you a direction, then you can sit down and break that down into, weekly, monthly, even like daily plans, to your point about like, how can I get 1% better every single day at this thing? And then that at least gives you something to do, so that you're like, hey, I'm not exactly enjoying this right now because I'm not a meathead gym person. I don't love this stuff. And so saying to enjoy the journey is like great. And I understand it conceptually that I should do it, but I don't love it. So how do I start to love it? Well, if you have at least a plan to do it, you can follow that plan. And then in that, hopefully over some amount of time, you'll eventually start to enjoy the actual journey. And I think that's the real key here. Whether you reach the goal or not, cool if you do, not that big of a deal if you don't, but you'll find your enjoyment in actually following a process rather than just going in there and trying to proverbially bash your head against the wall to, I'm supposed to love the journey. I'm supposed to love the journey. Like, you can't just force yourself to love it. Like, you got to find out something to love about it. And you'll only find that if you actually go through some sort of structured process.
I mean, yeah, that's a great point. I guess this will sound really backwards to say, but the goal would be to become less attached to the goal as you go through this process. And what I mean by that is, like, you sit down with your partner at night to watch a movie or share dinner or whatever, right? You don't sit down and think, what's the goal here? Like, what am I trying to get out of this engagement? Like, you're in the moment, you enjoy it, right? There's nothing, you didn't go like, I'm going to relax so hard right now. That's, you don't go with that mentality, because those are the things that bring you fulfillment, contentment, etc., and are a big part of your life. So I would say the goal would be that the goal keeps you going at the start. You become very attached to it. It helps you find your feet, helps you find your way, helps you discover where you want to go. Your first couple of goals might be, you might start walking towards them and you're like, this ain't for me. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go that way and then this way, right? And then over time, the idea would be that the goal becomes less relevant and the process and the way becomes more relevant, to the point where it becomes like brushing your teeth in the morning. You don't pick up your toothbrush with the goal of like, my dentist is going to be so pleased with me because I'm going to brush my teeth so hard and so what, you know what I mean? Like, it's just something you do. And to get to the point of training is just something I do, there has to be that initial buy-in process. That will well be different. For some people, will get in the gym and a week in, they're like, I'm meant to be here. You know, they'll go running for the first time. They're like, where has this been my entire life?
Hmm.
For some people, it might take them a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, to get to that point where A, they're doing the right thing, and B, they feel comfortable enough doing that thing that all that external noise that we spoke about goes away so that they can actually start enjoying the thing itself. And that's fine. Everyone will get to that point in some degree at some point. But it's just to realize that overemphasizing goals for too long can lead to this very up and down relationship of motivation and not. You know, like you you reach your goal, then what? There's just got to be another one. And like we said, the payoff to happiness isn't particularly great. So it's going to be this eternal dog chasing a car scenario if like the goal is all you have. You know, there's a constant cycle of, should we say, unhappiness, because you achieved something that you thought was what you wanted, and now you want the next level up from that and the next level up. You're constantly saying that what you are right now is not good enough to some degree, right? And I know this is far too deep and philosophical, but what whereas if we just slowly learn to detach from them, not to not have them, but just to not to emphasize their importance so much. Like, you are not your squat, you are not your six pack, right? You are a human being which is made up of so much more than that. Sure, the goal is cool and it keeps you going in a certain direction, but let's talk about the things you've learned, the hard work that's gone into it, and just being a happy good person on the way to those goals. And let's just put a little bit more emphasis on those so that we know that we're going to be in this game in the long term, and that we're actually going to be happy and fulfilled outside of that tiny window where hopefully we get the thing that we want.
In my opinion, a very underrated or underspoken about thing in all of fitness is improper. And I say improper with some hesitation because like it's not the person's fault for doing this improperly, but like improper goal setting, where inundated by marketing and whatever, and six pack in 6 weeks. And so you set the goal for yourself of getting a six pack in 6 weeks, but you're, 23% body fat. It's like that, it's just probably not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this goal of getting that thing and then you don't achieve it. And it's like, well, is it because you didn't do the work, or is it because the goal was just set incorrectly? And this is where, to your point about not being so married to that goal, but giving yourself a proper goal. And this is going to come over time through trial and error of like figuring out, well, what does it actually take to get the things that I want?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you realize somewhere along that path that like, that's not actually for me. I'm not actually willing to do the things required to achieve that goal in that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's no shame in resetting that and be like, okay, well, maybe I'll push the time frame. Maybe it'll take me 2 years. I thought it was going to take me 6 months, and maybe it'll take me 2 years. Or maybe, hey, I just don't actually want to squat 1,000 pounds. Like, I'm just never going to do that. I'll be good at 500 or whatever, whatever the number ends up being for you. And so this is also a thing I think a lot of people struggle with, and, not their fault, because how would you know? Like, this is our job and this is what we do. And so someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm 23% body fat. I want a six pack in 6 weeks. And you're like, no, probably not. But they wouldn't know that the same way we don't know stuff about their profession, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you help people decide on an initial goal then? Because I think we've established that it's not the be all end all, but it's a good thing to aim at. So how do we go about having this conversation to be like, hey, the thing that you're asking for is a little lofty. We can get there, but let's maybe try this.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, first off, we need to just take a step back and like, we need to think about what our goal is and just say, well, do a lot of people have this thing, whatever this thing is? The answer is probably going to be no. Most people aren't aiming, no, and I mean this in no disrespectful way, but most people aren't saying, I want to be 25% body fat. Maybe if they're morbidly obese, whatever that is their goal, and that's fantastic. But what I mean is, most people, when they think of a goal, they're aiming for something that a minority of people have attained or achieved, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we need to start asking ourselves, well, why is it only the minority that have it? If it could be achieved in 4 weeks with 20 minutes a day, we would all have it, right? So there's this, you just need to just zoom out this little bit. We need to get out of the world of social media where, again, it's all these positive feedback loops and echo chambers to, if you're training, if you look half decent with your shirt off, not that training is about that, but just as an example, if you look half decent on a day to day basis with your shirt off, you're probably one of the fittest, strongest people at Disneyland on any given day. And I use Disneyland not because it's a bad example. We all know what it is, and it's a conglomeration of the general population.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're training 3 days a week, eating reasonably well, you're already probably in the top 5%. So now when you're setting goals beyond that, if assuming they are, now you're aiming for like the top 1% or maybe less. And there's a reason that it's only the top 1%, right? So we need to just remember where we're actually at in the kind of hierarchical scheme of fitness, if that's
Mm-hmm.
a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then there just needs to be a little bit of grounding on just really basic, physiology, for want of a better term here. Like, let's talk about muscle gain. If once you've been training for a short while, if you can put on a couple of pounds of actual muscle tissue in a year, you're doing very well. And a couple of pounds of dry, lean muscle tissue will be about 50 to 75% more on the scale. So you put on 5 pounds of actual muscle tissue, you'll be about 7, 8 pounds heavier on the scale with the glycogen and the water and everything that comes with it. That that is going to represent at least a year's worth of effort. But that sounds really kind of sorrowing. But let's go all Lady Gaga, right, and get 5 pounds of beef mince and put that on your body, on the muscle groups that you care about, right? Like your legs, your shoulders, whatever. Put 5 pounds of actual tissue on those areas. That's an amount of gain that people, say you see your family once a year or whatever, they're going to go, "What have you been doing
Mm-hmm.
the last year?" And you're like, "Oh, I gained 5 pounds." And you're like, "Oh, actually, that's a big, like, go ask a competitive bodybuilder if they do 2 shows a year apart." And yes, I get they're at a high level and so on and so forth. They put on like a pound or two of stage weight in a year, they're over the moon because that is a genuine hard years worth of effort right there. And I'm not saying this to be demoralizing to people. I'm saying this that what you perceive as maybe a small win is actually a huge win, one that you should be really happy with and celebrating and things like that. So, like, that's very slow. Getting stronger. Go and check out a website called Open Powerlifting. It's a website where they conglomerate all the results of every powerlifting competition that's sanctioned worldwide, and they've been going for a while now. A guy who came out to Elite did a meta-analysis on it, really good one, looking at how fast people actually progress. So now we're looking at people who actually compete in powerlifting. So it's probably fair to assume they're, should we say, more serious than the average person in the gym. And again, not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but they've probably got a pretty good level of buy-in here. They're pretty serious. Also, they've got a pretty unimodal goal. Like, they want to be good at squat, bench, and deadlift. They're not trying to run a 10K and have a six pack and get bigger, but like, they're quite
Mm-hmm.
tunnel visioned in terms of their focus. So they're working hard, harder than the average, and they're very unimodal in their focus. Once they've been competing for a year or two, providing they stay in the weight category they're in, so we're assuming they don't gain huge amounts of muscle or whatever, they get better about 2% a year. If you're totaling 1,000 pounds now, you're going to total 1,020 next year and 1,040 the next year. And it just helps reframe what is good. Because if
Mm-hmm.
your expectation is like going from 1,000 pound total to 1,300 is good in a year, then you're just lining yourself up for disappointment before you even started. Whereas if you're like, "Oh, that's okay. Yeah, sure, maybe there's a day or two of like, this sport sucks. Why am I doing?" But eventually you'll come around to the fact that like, "Oh, this is okay." And actually getting around the idea of progress is really slow is actually really freeing once you get okay with it, because dude, you're going to put on 2 pounds of muscle this year if you're lucky. Do you know what? You're feeling really sick and you think you have to go to the gym today. You probably don't. Like, it's probably okay to rest. Or maybe, it's your anniversary. It's probably okay if you don't train legs, for 1 week, because even if you did everything perfectly, you'd put on 2 pounds of muscle this year. So maybe you'll put on 1.95 instead. Is so it maybe it's more important that you go spend that time with your wife or your kid, because in the grand scheme, what you're losing on the end result is so small, and it just helps take the pressure off. Like, yeah, so then you go in the gym and you've been training for 2 months. But in your head, you know how quickly strength comes. You know how quickly muscle gains come. You don't expect to see an extra plate on the bar in 2 months' time. You don't expect to be outgrowing your t-shirts in 2 months' time. Like you know that these things are going to take more time, and therefore you don't start rushing either. You're just happy to know that you're incrementally just ticking along, and that's okay. You don't If a good year is 2% stronger and 2% more muscular, cool. I am in no rush. I have no expectations to, look like a Men's Health cover model tomorrow. And I can be relaxed in the process now. When I don't get that thing now, it doesn't mean you're doing everything wrong. You don't have to start second guessing the process every time that you turn up to the gym and you're not 100 pounds stronger. Like you the reality is most people are doing a lot of things right. They're just, I
Mm-hmm.
would say, if they're the two biggest hangups for most people, is the application of enough effort. Like training hard is harder than people think. Like what they think is
Mm-hmm.
hard is probably not as hard as it should be. And again, not a criticism. Your only reference point is as hard as you've ever worked.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've only ever worked a 6 out of 10, well, then to you, 6 out of 10 is 10 out of 10. At some point, you realize that's not the case, and so on and so forth. It's going to be that. And it's going to be everyone ends up shooting themselves in the foot by changing their goals too often or what they're doing too often because they have the expectation that X, Y, and Z are going to be achieved in like a quarter or a third of the time frame that they probably should be. And that's even if you do everything right. And fat loss is the same. Fat loss is a lot quicker compared to putting on muscle, for example, but I would say people probably are aware at the rate at which you can lose fat, like 1 or 2 pounds a week, 1%, whatever. But most people vastly underestimate the amount of fat that they have. And
Mm-hmm.
again, maybe this comes from social media or whatever. Like, I know for a fact, like, I'm from the UK, so like, I like rugby. I know for a fact for a long time, like, rugby players will lie about how much they weigh because it makes you more intimidating, right? So then we look at said rugby player and we supposedly think they're 30 pounds heavier than they are. They're like, that guy's 240 and like 5%. No, they're not. They're like 210 and 5%, right? And in the same way, we kind of then get this shifted or weird perception of like how much the average ripped, lean, that term means different things to different people at the end of the day, actually how heavy they are and how impressive they might be in person. And what I mean by that is you look at the average guy who's like on the front cover of Men's Health or competes in like Men's Physique drug free or whatever, in a baggy t-shirt on the street, they look like a dude who trains. And again, don't mean that in a derogatory way,
Yep.
but that is the truth. That you don't look at them and go, "Oh my god." You see a Mr. Olympia competitor, that's different, right? But most people aren't striving for that ideal. That's the ideal that most are striving for. Like, okay, like we had a guy out on the podcast who trained Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds for a Deadpool,
Don.
right? Yeah, sorry, Don
Yeah.
Saladino. Yeah, I'm presuming people don't know who these are. I'm sorry. Um, we get someone like Ryan Reynolds or Hugh Jackman, you put them in that movie scene with the right lighting on the right day and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Yeah, my God. Yeah, fantastic. But again, put them maybe in like a double XL t-shirt or, whatever size is too big for them on an average day. They just look good. They don't look eye-poppingly
Mm-hmm.
fantastic, right? And we just have this perception that like that person weighs this much and looks like that. But in reality, they're probably 20 or 30 pounds lighter and they don't look like that all the time. So when we're looking at ourselves now, take the amount of weight that you think you need to lose to look the way you think you want to look. Multiply that by an extra 50 to 100%. That's probably where you need to go to get there. And maybe that puts you off and that's cool. Or it doesn't. And now well, okay, like 3 months, it might was a sensible time frame to lose 20 pounds, but I actually need to lose 30 or 35 to look the way that I want to look. Cool. Now your time frame is just longer. But again, a big part of this is everyone always seems to think I'm going to be ripped when I reach X pounds. And no one ever gets that right.
Mm-hmm.
Even people who compete in bodybuilding, who have been on stage and know what they weigh when they're X% body fat, they get it wrong. And us, Gen Pop, average Joe over here, who's never been lean in their life, what hope have we got of guessing it? We have zero, right? Just so get that number, add 50 to 100%. That's probably where you need to be. And your first reaction is usually going to be, my God, I haven't been that light since high school. It's like, what? And does it matter? Like, do people look like, do you measure your self-worth on like how much, like you don't weigh enough to be a good person? Like, does it matter if you're 170 pounds? And, you know, the point I've always made in these scenarios is, if we're talking about aesthetic goals, if you look in the mirror and you go, damn, I look good, do you even care what's on the scale? Is it even, it's irrelevant. It could say 500 pounds and it wouldn't matter, right? You just wouldn't be able to ride the roller coasters at Disneyland that we mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
right? It would be irrelevant because you would be happy with the aesthetic that you have achieved. So it's okay to be lighter than you think that you need to be. It's okay to have more weight to lose than you think that you need to lose. That's all perfectly fine. Again, embrace the suck, embrace the process, and just accept that maybe you have a little bit more to go than you think. But again, if we're aiming to be in that 1%, there's a reason it's the 1%. And that's cool. Like, good for you for aiming at it. Just, you will be a lot more, or you have a much higher chance of success if you're not going into the process with the wool pulled over your eyes from the start, that like this is something that you can have by next month. Like, most people probably do have enough willpower. They probably are consistent enough. They're just constantly looking for these things because they believe I get from X to Y in this time frame and they're not getting that. So then they're like, well, I must be missing this. Maybe it's this magic supplement. Maybe it's this magic workout routine, or maybe it's the keto diet or whatever. And they keep changing their lanes and changing processes when actually they were going forward probably at a great rate, and they just self-sabotage, not knowingly, but they self-sabotage, and that's why they're stepping back. So I agree with you on a big part that having realistic goals is really important. The reason everyone avoids it is just because it's depressing what realistic goals actually are. But we don't avoid that in any other scenario. What I mean is, like, say you're a guitar teacher and like kid comes in on day one, he's like, I want to play Stairway to Heaven blindfolded. You're not going to say, cool, we can get there in 4 weeks. You're going to
Right.
go, all right, well, that's going to take a while. Like, we, in every other context, we're quite happy to accept that the goal might be far away. Like, you want a promotion at work, you probably accept it's not going to be next week or the week after, or you're going to have to put in some graft for 6 months or whatever. You know, probably everyone listened to this got through high school. You know, you had to work pretty hard for several years there to get some output there. And we just need to just redefine how we look at that process when it comes to fitness in the gym. And, you know, I make this comment quite often, but when it comes to like lifting weights, especially, it seems to be the only place where people presume, and again, I'm not being critical of people here, it's society has warped their opinion,
Mm-hmm.
where people presume they can accidentally become too good at it, right? Like, I don't want to get
Right.
too big. I don't
Right.
want to be really strong. Okay,
Right.
that gets said, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, we've
Uh-huh.
all heard that probably at some point. Does anyone ever get into running and say, I do not want to break the world record marathon time? Like, I'm just putting that out there right now. That's not my goal. Like, we never look at that. We don't start swimming and go, I ain't trying to be Michael Phelps. Like, just so you know, I don't need that. Like, we know, you know that. But and yet when it comes to the gym, it's almost like, or lifting at least, there's this subconscious perception that we could accidentally get these incredible results, which just don't happen. And again, I think that is a byproduct of what we get bombarded with. So, you know, it's just a case of maybe having conversations with people who have been in it for long enough. Like, I think that's a big thing that's missing from gyms now, is the community element. They're like, you know, you go in a gym like 30 years ago or whatever, like, if people aren't on their phones, maybe they're talking to each other more. You might go and talk to the guy or girl that's been lifting for 5, 10 years, and they can kind of put it in your head like, okay, this is what you should be doing. This is what's realistic. You know, you're getting it straight from the horse's mouth, like someone who's
Mm-hmm.
walked that path. Most people who step foot in the gym now don't really have that. You know, they don't have that guiding hand of someone who's actually walked that path to correct them on these misconceptions when we've gone in. And I think if we could go back to that more community based environment in a gym, I think so many of the problems that beginners and, you know, new people to the gym and lifting struggle with, I think so much of that would go away. Sadly, I don't think that's going to happen, but we do have more information than ever. That's good. Unfortunately, it's just hidden under more misinformation than
Mm-hmm.
we've ever had times like 100. But just, you know, take the time to do your research, I would say. And if whatever you're being told sounds a little bit disappointing, it's probably true. Again, I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Yeah. Unfortunately, again, I mean, this is all such a delicate balance to kind of bring it a little bit full circle towards the Shaolin Temple idea of bringing that to fitness conceptually. You said something earlier where no one's going to get excited about getting to a 25% body fat or bench pressing 50 pounds. Like, that's not a lifetime goal. That's not getting someone off the couch for the
Sure.
most part. Not getting someone off the couch like, hey, I'm going to do this whole fitness thing. And so it's the people who are pushing the boundaries, who are breaking the world record of marathons, and who are squatting 1,000 pounds, and who are doing genuinely exceptional things among exceptional people, who are influencing, dare I use that word, the average person to kind of get into the gym and take up the fitness lifestyle. But the problem with that is that then people think that that's somehow what they need to do or what they need to achieve. Like, it's such an interesting point you just made about how the gym is the only place where this happens. No one watches someone amazing playing a guitar and saying, oh, maybe I want to learn guitar. And they realize that they're not going to be, Jimi Hendrix. They're just going to be whoever they are and, maybe learn a couple songs and that's that. So it's such an interesting balance. Like, I think for us in the fitness industry, and just for people who are listening, to be like, hey, you should get inspired by these people who are really pushing the boundaries and doing exceptional things. But also, you got to put some time in to realize what it actually takes to get those things, that you can find somewhere along that continuum of doing absolutely nothing and being the absolute best ever in history, where you fit in there, and
Sure.
with something that's going to make you happy, and with the work that you're willing and able to put in.
Sure. And I don't want this to turn into a, everyone gets a thanks for turning up medal, but I think there also needs to be just a change of perception of, well, what defines exceptional? Yeah, sure, we can all watch the Olympics and we can all agree that that's exceptional, right? But, and I'm sure you've been in the scenario, right? Like, I coach someone who's like a single mom, has 2 jobs and 3 young kids. She goes to the gym 4 days a week. That's exceptional. I don't care what anyone says. Like, she makes that time in that schedule to do that thing for herself so she can be a better mom that is exceptional. Like, and I'm not giving her a pat on the back to say the hard work is done. Keep doing it. Keep being exceptional. But I think we underestimate what our own actions actually mean. I've coached a lot of people over the years that have had all sorts of different injuries, chronic illnesses, you name it. What's exceptional for that person can look like absolutely nothing to the outside observer. And this is a story I've said on a few podcasts, and I bring it up with good reason. One of the ladies that we coached back home in the UK when we had our powerlifting team there, she was a Masters 7 competitor. I won't tell her age because she'll get mad at me if I do, but just know Masters 7's, I think it's the highest age category, I think. So that puts it in context. She broke her own world record. She got a 100 kilo deadlift in her weight category. And to most people will think 100 kilos, like, yes, at her age, that's impressive or whatever. Sure. But, most people can lift 100 kilos with a bit of training. However, the context here is that she lost her husband 9 or 12 months before that. Like, she'd been like high school sweetheart type thing, right? And she came up to Naomi and I, and she said, these were pretty much her words: I never thought I'd be happy again. And at that moment, she was. And that's what she came out and like nearly brings a tear to my eye when I say this out loud. But that is just a 100 kilo deadlift to anyone. There were people later that day deadlifting triple, quadruple, whatever that, right? But to that person, they thought maybe they'd never achieve that level of happiness ever again. And right there they got it. And I'll tell you what, for anyone who's thinking about their competing in strength sports and stuff like that, she got a way louder cheer for that lift than any of the guys or whatever squatting 1,000 pounds. I assure you. Like, there's nothing, like, it's going back to the whole like everyone's goals are important and type thing. So like for her, that was exceptional. That was a 2.5 kilo PB. She added 2.5%, give or take, to her PB. Like, we'd all agree that's nothing exceptional, but in the context, it was monumental. And she will remember that until the day she dies, right? And again, it's just, what is exceptional? Like, for her, that was exceptional. It was 2.5 kilos. Who cares? Well, she cares. And that's the important thing. So don't down torque the importance of your own actions, your own steps along the path, because they represent a lot more than you probably think they do. And over time, sadly, is probably the only time that we look back and actually appreciate how exceptional those things were, right? Like, you know, we all go through a point in our life, right? Like where like everything is chaos. Maybe we've got like a family member who's sick, or work is crazy. At some point, we look back and go, I have no idea how I navigated that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? We just don't see it at the time. And in the same way, many of the things that you guys out there are doing right now, over time you'll look back and you'll be so thankful you did those things. So just give yourself a little bit more credit. Not that you need to stop and that the work is done, but just be aware that what you're doing right now is important and in your own context may well be exceptional. And for all you know, if we took, again, sorry, this is a rant, so I apologize, but I coach someone right now and again, I won't use their name, but they currently have brain cancer, and they've had it for several years. They've had multiple surgeries, chemo off and on, all these types of things. And they're very strong individual by any standard, but they obviously go through periods where they really struggle to train and all these types of things based on whatever treatments and drugs are being used. And they will have a bad workout. We all do, right? She will have a bad workout. And my point at one point to her when she was really struggling with this was, imagine you put 100 people in your exact shoes right now. So they've had your exact same life experiences, all of the stuff that you've been through, and there's been a lot for this individual. How many of those people do you think would even be in the gym?
Mm-hmm.
Full stop. Some of them might not even be here, not to be morbid, but that's
Mm-hmm.
probably the truth. How many would be in the gym? How many of them would be performing at the level that you are right now? You probably wouldn't find one. And we can probably all say that at some point in our life, right? Like we'll be going through something and we can think, if you actually transplanted 100 people right now with my mindset, my experiences, my past, my trauma, my current life circumstances, how many of them would be in this gym right now swinging that kettlebell, which I'm mad about because it's 4 kilos lighter than last week? It's probably going to be a pretty small number. And again, it just, maybe that 2 minute exercise for you helps reframe how important what you're doing really is. And I hope everyone takes a minute or two every now and then when they're struggling to do that.
Yeah, what a duo of stories there. I mean, perfectly encapsulates what you're trying to say. That like exceptional is certainly relative, right? I mean, I think to sum it up, I can say we should all be simultaneously, or strive to be simultaneously, happy, content, and proud of the achievements that we've got to this point, and also hungry and ambitious for more and to continue to strive forward. And if you can strike that balance, like you'll be in a pretty good place. Not easy, but if you can get there, it's a good place to be.
Yeah, and it's the same with happiness and everything else. And again, I don't want to call it lifestyle coaching, but when you coach people, you're kind of all in.
Yeah,
You end up dealing with everything. Like,
yeah. The biggest part
some
of personal
people,
training is the personal part, right?
yeah, for sure. Like, there's a lot of people out there, you don't know how good you can feel. And
Mm-hmm.
this is true whether it's day one in the gym and you've never exercised before, or it could be, you've been working a job you hate for 10 years, or whatever. It doesn't matter. You might not even have a concept in your head of how happy you can be or how good at something you can be until you go do it. So like that, for me, that balance comes from, I appreciate what I have right now. I admire the effort that's gone into it, but also we all have truly no idea where that ceiling is. Like, Usain Bolt certainly didn't know what the ceiling was.
Mm-hmm.
He trained 4 years to run something that lasted less than 10 seconds. Like, that's a lot of faith and commitment to an outcome that there's zero guarantee, right? And that is the kicker with all of this. It's all very easy for us sometimes to sit back and say, well, you look at someone like Usain Bolt and say, well, I would train 6 days a week if I knew I'd get the 100-meter world records. Like, maybe we would, but would you train 6 days a week for 4 years with no guarantee
Right.
that you would get that? That's the kicker. And that's where that balance needs to come in, because if you don't have any appreciation for what's gone before and where you're at now, then all you have is that goal, that thing, that pinnacle in the future. And then if there is no guarantee of it, you're not going to ever be motivated to be there. Whereas if you appreciate the here and now and what you've done, you know that this is important, and there needs to be at least some level of effort to stay still, even in that regard. So you keep going then. And yes, that balance takes time to achieve, but it's a nice it's a nice exercise to do sometimes, to sit down and think, what are some really cool things that I would like to achieve? Cool, write those down. But also sit down right now and think, like, maybe 5 years ago, what are some things that you have or you can do right now that 5 years ago you thought you may never, or that you just couldn't? There's probably quite a few things on that list too. And in 5 years' time, those columns will probably be swapped over. For all you know, you'll have all the stuff that you think is insurmountable now, and your goalposts will be further in the future. But having both columns is important, not just the column of what do I want later. That would be an exercise for me that just helps reframe these things.
I think there's an Alex Hormozy quote, something along the lines of, "You've already achieved things that you said would make you happy, and
Mm-hmm.
yet here you are, not
Yep.
necessarily happy with the things you have." And so
Mm-hmm.
it's great to do these exercises to really sit down and just to be able to put that in perspective. And so I think if we can try to sum this up, and I want to wrap up here just to be respectful of your time, Tom.
Sure.
This has been great, but taking the time to pause and reflect and like think about the things that you've done, think about what you can do, what you can improve, what you've done really great, and be proud of yourself, but also be ambitious and continue to work and push the boundaries is is a good exercise. But it just takes a little bit of patience, a little bit of foresight,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe just a little bit of grace for yourself as well.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why, once again, right at the beginning of this episode, the mind, the mindset, the behavior, and the physical action all have to be in one. Like, if the mindset and the attitude is right, all the physical stuff will follow. If we have that balance that we've just spoken about, then we will put in the right amount of effort for long enough in the right way to hopefully get to where the things we want. But if the mind is not in the right place, we're looking for the quick wins, we're looking for the easy answers, whatever it might be, we're constantly going to scupper. And again, that's why we're here having this conversation, trying to emphasize both. And then once you have both in line, it's a great place to be. And it's a place that's worth striving to be in and working hard for. I would say that.
Completely agree with you. Is there anything else surrounding these topics? I mean, and we can go for hours, but is there anything else that you feel like that we've left out that you wanted to interject here?
I would just say similar, very quick. On a similar note, like, all of this comes around habits, right? Like, habits are what like breed these results that we're talking about. And again, just something that to help people get their mind around these things, like, because everyone's always trying to build better habits. Like, building habits is something we've all done. Like, think of all the bad habits you have. You're perfectly capable of building habits. They might not be the ones you want right now, but at some point in time, you've built this huge plethora of habits, some of which you've decided maybe you want to get rid of, or new ones that you want. But you have illustrated to yourself time and time again you're capable of building habits. You drink 3 coffees a day, you brush your teeth every morning, whatever it might be. So just be aware that the same processes that got you those things and got you the bad habits that maybe you want to get rid of are the same processes that you're fully capable of that can build all the new habits that you want. You are already, in essence, you have already proven to yourself that you are fully capable of doing the things you need to do by having all of these things that maybe you want to get rid of now, but you just need to apply it differently. So that would be my kind of overarching message to people who maybe are struggling.
Very well said, and I agree. And I think a good place to leave people off with something to think about and something to chew on. Tom, thank you so much for being very generous with your time and for sharing with us today. I appreciate it
Pleasure.
very, very much. Where can people find you and learn more about everything that you've got going on? I'll throw it in the show notes.
Sure. I mean, social media for me, I've only got the one. It's on Instagram, which is at Phoenix Performance Training. Feel free to drop me a DM, whatever, anytime. I've written articles for people like Elite FTS and Tib Army. I'm on a lot of the Elite FTS YouTube videos and things like that. But more importantly, if you want to follow me, you can drop me a message anytime. Like, this is what I do. I do this because I like to help people. It's, without sounding too dark and morbid, like, doing this for a living is what really gave me a sense of purpose in life, which I didn't feel like I used to have. So, like that story about that lady about, being happy when she thought, that's what I do this for. So if people are out there and they're struggling, please feel free to just ask a question or drop a message. If that's the thing that helps make a difference on your journey, then what is 30 seconds of time in relation to that?
Agreed. And this is why you're one of the best. And this is why, again, I'm grateful to you for taking the time. So thank you very much, Tom. Phoenix
No, thank
Performance
you for
Training
having me, man.
on Instagram. I'll throw the tags in the show notes, but Google Tom's name. You'll find him. If you can't, figure that out. He's everywhere in the fitness stuff. So again, Tom, thank you so much. Yeah. Like, share, subscribe, send the podcast to your friends, all those good things. Take these things to heart and really try to implement them as best as you can. We appreciate you very, very much. Go outside, be a good person. See you next time.